In the darkest nights, we find our light. Battered souls, but we won't lose sight. Surviving together, never alone. Through every trial, we carry on. Surviving together, never alone. Through every trial, we carry on. Surviving together, we stand tall. United forever. Strength and courage will overcome. Oh, surviving together, victorious, never, never alone. Hand in hand, we'll face the unknown.
We see you, we hear you, and we believe you. Hey, everyone. How you doing today? You've landed at Surviving Together. Welcome on this Wednesday evening. At least that's what time it is here in Michigan. Hopefully you guys will all find us today. We had a little bit of a technical difficulty. StreamYard's, or YouTube actually, it's YouTube's fault. They've changed some things around and you can now watch this in either vertical or horizontal format. And so I don't know what you guys see on your end, but what I see when I go to the channel is I see the link posted twice, which is weird. So I had to I deleted one because I'm like, oh, you're posting it twice, not realizing what I was actually doing. So had to create a new stream and the new thumbnail and all that kind of stuff. So little late getting on, apologize about that. But here at Surviving Together, my intros never go smooth, do they? This is a safe space for trauma survivors to connect and to come together on their healing journey, as well as providing trauma-related education for all. I want to say hi to Crystal, who is here today. And at least in the chat, I know there's a few other people lurking behind the scenes, it looks like. And hopefully more of you guys will find us for the live as this is posted now that we're actually live. If not, I know you guys will catch us on replay. But I do have a wonderful guest here tonight who has really, embodied taking all of the trauma that they went through in the past and really doing something with it now. And so I want to welcome on Miss Kimberly Miner. How are you doing today, Kimberly?
I'm good. How are you?
Great. Kimberly is a sexual assault and domestic violence survivor, and she was also in the corporate world for a while. And we're going to talk about that and then how she transitioned into doing this amazing advocacy work and what her organization is called and all of the things that she has been doing and all the people that she has been helping over the past years. Forget how long have you actually been doing your advocacy work?
It's been about a decade now.
About 10 years now. That's just amazing. So really, I just want to start out with, you can introduce yourself if there's anything else that you want to say in terms of introducing yourself, and then just want to find out a little bit about your background and then how you transitioned into doing advocacy work, because you really did a 180 in terms of the type of work that you were doing, right?
Yeah, it's completely different.
This is not like you went from counseling into, doing straight trauma work. So, hi, Indigo, how are you doing? So, Kimberly, take it away.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much. So yeah, my background, as she was saying, is that I spent about 25 years in corporate America in packaging sales. And after 25 years, I was kind of at the point where it was something that I was good at, but it was something that just was not calling my name anymore. I think I mentioned previously, it kind of felt like I was just kind of like banging my head into a brick wall. And I just didn't feel like every day it was kind of like this grudge of like something that I know I had to do versus something I wanted to do. And at the time, my youngest was had graduated from high school. And so I finally felt like I had that freedom to be able to, make that change, because I was so nervous about doing something beforehand, because it was something that I knew how to do. I knew that I was good at it. I knew what was that I was making doing it. And so that was, the comfort zone. And, I think that change probably would have been a lot different now, because we're in a world where social media allows for so many different opportunities to present itself and people showing the different things that they do. And so, but at that time, social media was not like really a thing. So, Facebook was like the biggest thing going on. Um, so I just didn't take those chances. So, but when I did, is that I went over and I wanted to work with other women who had had been through similar or just trauma, in all aspects. So I just felt like after everything I'd been through, I felt like I wanted to help those start to like find their voice. But I think that there's a little bit of it that when I first got into it, is that I still was not, I wouldn't say like 100% into like that healing process, and really, understanding, some of my own things that I brought to the table. And so I think it was a great opportunity for myself to do a lot of healing, and recognizing that I did need to go back into therapy and, work on myself on things that, I found myself like inserting myself into, other people's, lives of, whether it was on a basis of that maybe they were, in trauma, and I would insert myself into that trauma, and thinking that somehow that was going to like fulfill something within me. And what I was doing is that I was crossing that line of, that you have to have, is that your problems, and somebody else's problems is their problems. And you can be there to be empathetic. You can be there to provide resources. You can be there to be a listening ear, but it is not, and nor is it a good idea or healthy for you or that other person to insert yourself into their lives. And it doesn't matter if it's like they're going through trauma. It doesn't matter if it's friendships, or it doesn't matter if it like who it is or what their circumstances are. The minute that you cross that line and you make their problem your problem without being asked, then that shows that like the unhealthiness within you. And so it helped in that journey for myself, is to realize that there was like unhealthiness within me that was still having direct impact on decisions or things that were going on in my own personal life. So that was, it really kind of, I would say it was like the deep healing that really began to happen is when I started doing that. And so I went from that to, I spent time of doing women's summits online, of having speakers from across the country be on there and talk about and really talk to those who have gone through trauma, which was like great during the pandemic, because that's really was the only form of being able to connect with people. So as I was going through that process, I realized in working with others that were going through situations that were either, like mine, or it was just, a crisis that they were, in the midst of, because they were in an abusive situation, is that that I understood it from a survivor standpoint or a victim standpoint, and the frustrations that you feel with, like, either not getting what you need out of the attorney, not being able to afford an attorney, the issues that come up with court. I understood all those things because I, felt those things myself. But what I didn't understand is that is the other side of it. And that's when I made the decision to go back to school. And I'm now, working or have my master's finished in criminal justice, and I'm just short of finishing my doctorate in criminal justice. So, that's something that I wound up finding out is that, I did it for wanting to help others, but it actually was something that was so beneficial to myself is that as I went through it, it was something that I was really passionate about. And so
Mhm.
I found like the classes very, very interesting. And when you're interested into something, right, you become engrossed in it, and your
Mhm.
capabilities of being able to, do better is obviously, it makes sense, right? So I
Yeah.
was really proud of myself that in both my bachelor's and my master's, I graduated with a 4.0 as a summa cum laude.
Fabulous.
And so that was just such a personal achievement for myself because
Yeah.
I was healing the wounds of that inner child of mine of when I was growing up, feeling that like I didn't meet that, that expectation. So but so then as I got that education, it made me understand unfortunately made me understand is that the system that I felt was broken was as broken as I thought it was, but even more so. But what it did allow me to have is to have an understanding of that. Number one, we don't have to like the law. We don't have to like the way that it's done. And we don't have to like the processes. We can hate it, but it doesn't change the what you have to be able to do and have in order to be successful in using the
Mhm.
court system the way that it's set up. And that's the thing is that, people when they come from an emotional point of view, is that they want to come into the court system and they want to rewrite the court system and tell the court system you
Yeah.
need to understand from my point of view. And the court system
Mhm.
is, inadvertently, they're not saying it to your face, but they're inadvertently through how they're ruling and the processes of telling you is that that's just not the way it is. And
Yeah.
so, so many people wind up walking out of court and they're not getting, things that, judgments that are in their favor. There actually can be quite the reverse. And, within, it can be 10 minutes somebody spends in front of a judge and, that their whole life, not only their life, but their kids' lives and everything else has an upheaval within minutes. And
Mhm.
then you're left spinning of trying to figure out what it is to try to do with all that. And so now you're not just had the problem that you went in there for the first place, but now you have all this other stuff that is like kind of like, has been thrown on your plate. And now you have all these plates in the air and have no idea how to approach any single one of them now, because now the problem is like 10 times bigger than it was when you first began. And it could have been bad to begin with. So, so now, what I love is to be able to do is, and what I'm currently doing is to not only work with the survivors, but I love to work with the attorneys and the court system is that, we can help through that process to make it easier. And, we live in a time currently where, 84% of survivors cannot afford attorneys or they cannot pay all the way through for their attorneys. And so they find themselves, going pro se. And when you're going pro se is that you're walking into a world that you have no experience in. And not only do you have no experience in, but you're walking in during a time where you are at the utmost, crisis in your life. And so,
Yeah.
nobody can absolutely blame you for not being able to think from a, logical point of view, because what you're wanting is a solution to your problem now.
Right.
You don't want all these like if ands or buts and like you have to this is like you could care less about any of that because that's not your problem. Your problem is this, and that's what you want to solve. And so
Well, and
uh
it's a very emotional issue. I mean, there's so
absolutely.
much emotion
And court
and
is not about emotion. Court is not
no.
about emotion. Court is not about crying. that's not what the court's set up for. The court is set up for is that you have a filing in front of you and they're going to address it in both sides. And they're looking at both sides of like, you're here. And so, who's going to give me the best version of, having the ability to understand the law and articulate it in a way where they're not changing what the law says, but they're articulating in a way that kind of transcribes of it to fit their benefit of their argument. And so whoever gives the most benefit and has the most documentation to back that up is then where is what gets ruled on. And there's two things. One is that there's a lot of judges that actually have a bad disposition of not liking those who represent themselves pro se. They want to have attorneys in there because they like that whole benefit of those who have gone through law school, who are attorneys, who practice law, understand the law, and they can talk the language back and forth. And so they tend to have a bit of a dislike for those who are representing pro se. The second thing is that those who do not understand of how to correctly file things or how to correctly put the information on and have supporting exhibits that put it on there so that you can go there. And instead of giving the judge is not looking for your life story. What they want is they want bullet points of what happened. And then they want instances that back it up so that you can actually then support what it is your bullet point is. And so they don't want you sitting there saying about like, this person is a bad person, or like they don't want to deal with that. What they want to do is that you inadvertently are saying what this person does and how their attitude is and who they are as a person based on your statements and about your exhibits that you present that speak for themselves. And so that's what, my real basis is that really helping those through, whether it's, family court, whether it's order of protections, and then also, work within the capacity of doing, trauma recovery. I've built a lot of trauma recovery programs that we work on that healing journey, how to do effective decision-making, because many of those who are either in the midst of a divorce or they're done with the divorce on the other side, but they're still having to deal with the whole court system and all the BS and stuff that goes with it when you are a survivor of abuse, is that you are dealing with a process of like, how do you like detach your own opinion from going through the opinion of what this other person has been saying. And so I call it living in the silence, is that you're not in this like all uproar anymore and you're left with your own thoughts. So I always tell people that I work with is that, you were very strong when you lived through that situation. Every day you got
Absolutely.
up, you are 100% successful getting through the worst day of your life. And so like your abuser was like frustrated because you kept getting back up. Give it like, I'm going to take one more of whatever the BS is, and so, when you get out is that there's two vulnerabilities that happen when you get out. One is that the abuser has lost control and it becomes much more detrimental for the person who has left. That's one. The second thing is that you almost start losing the amount of strength that you had because now you are doubting yourself. All those thoughts and things were said and stuff, like it creeps up in your mind and you're thinking, how am I going to do this? Like, how am I going to afford this? How am I going to what am I going to do now? Because through this whole process, I lost my job or this, like, there's like can be 8 million different things that, could have happened that now are presented in front of you. And on top of the fact that maybe he's still taking you back to court and now he's using the kids and stuff. And so you're thinking to yourself, like, how, maybe I am the problem, maybe like all those things. And so we kind of like backtrack. And we are not as strong as we were when we were dealing with all this stuff and got to the point where we say, like, I'm not going to deal with this anymore. I'm going to get out and, go, get out of the situation for myself, for my kids, whatever the particular situations is for each individual person. So, that's really where my efforts are in really trying to, focus. And I like to do a lot of policy advocacy too, is like, how can I help because of the understanding that I have the law, and having the understanding of talking with those who've been through issues, and then also the things that I have experienced myself, is being able to go and hopefully, support, bills that are of benefit, that need to be changed, that need to be implemented, that, and then also speaking with those that, are underneath, that once those laws are passed, to getting them, like helping them understand of like, how that can protect victims, what the benefits are, how it can be used in court, and all those things. And so that's really where, my heart and passion is that, trying to, working on being the voice, while those who are working on finding their voice.
Um, so let's backtrack a little bit. Well, first off, can you give the name of your business or organization? I'm not sure how you term it.
Yeah. So I have two parts. I have a nonprofit part that's Envision You, and then I have a consulting where I do, it's EY divorce and trauma consulting.
Okay. So we had a question about what does pro se mean? And before I answer that, I just want to backtrack to the first part of what you were saying, and um, don't want people to be confused, because they might be like, so pro se just means you don't have an attorney, you're representing yourself. Okay. And um, Crystal, we have the criminal side of things, right? Where the victim is not going to be represented. Well, the only person represented by an attorney person is going to be the defendant. So the abuser, the perpetrator. So if there's criminal charges, whether it's an assault or aggravated assault, domestic violence charge, whatever it is, you're going to have the prosecutor on the one side and you're going to have the defendant on the other, and that person's going to be represented. And if they can't afford an attorney is appointed to them. In the situation where you can represent yourself pro se, I think what Kimberly was discussing is in the divorce context, which is civil. So that's a separate arm of the law. And you, excuse me, you have to have your own attorneys. There's no attorneys that can be appointed for you in civil court. So when people go to actually, divorce their partner, or if they are not married and they're just looking for child support, or to, have parenting time and all that kind of stuff, all that's done civilly, and everybody has to represent themselves. And it was a point that I was going to make when you were speaking about this, is that I think the number one thing that anybody going through a situation who is looking to get out can do for themselves is documentation. Document every instance of things that happen, whether it's just a notebook, a journal, take pictures, have video, whatever the situation is, and it can be, your own. Who was there? Who witnessed it? Can you get a statement from that person? Documentation really is key when you're dealing with not only civil, but also if there's criminal charges that are separate from what you're dealing with in the civil side of courts. Being able to present that information to the prosecutor and arm them with that information is going to really help them in their case, because there's only so much that an investigator can do, right? In terms of, law enforcement coming and interviewing you about the situation. Whereas if you say, yeah, this is what happened, and these are the types of things that led up to it, and here's everything that's happened, and here are the photos that I took, because not everybody calls right away, right? You have an instance and it may be, a week later, and they finally get the courage up to call, and maybe their bruises have faded, or maybe there weren't any marks, and you just tend to doubt yourself then, that doubt that you were talking about, right? Person can start doubting what really happened. So it's critical that anybody who's going through a domestic violence situation document, 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 document. So
Yeah, and
that's
to support what you're saying is that there's actually a tremendous amount of we live in a day and age where we walk around with a mini computer in our hands, right? The smartphones, and there's actually a lot of apps on there that actually they look like a calculator, and you have to have a certain code or whatever. And there's different things that are out there now that are free, and what it allows you to do is that and then also the other one that's really important before I further explain that app is that is making sure that you have a voice activated memo on your phone so that
mm,
anytime conversations are happening, because sometimes it's hard to remember, especially when you're in the midst of a crisis, is that maybe you forget like exactly how it was said or what was said or the emphasis of something that was done and stuff. And so when you are able to have that, what it does is that it's documenting it for you. And the other thing that is great about having those is that there's actually other apps that are either on your phone or on your desktop, and you can go onto the internet and it will then translate it into a document so that you can then have that for court too, so that you can have both, so that when it
that's awesome.
has minute by minute by minute. So therefore, when you put that in for as part of like exhibits that you want to express of things that have transpired, is that it can't be argued that somehow you manipulated it. It
Hmm.
would skip a minute. It wouldn't allow you for do that. So that's extremely important to know the benefits of having some of those applications to help yourself out. And then on some of these apps that I was talking about is that what it does is that it allows you to upload. You can upload videos, you can upload the voice memos, you can upload pictures, you can upload documents.
Wow, that's awesome.
And what's nice about that is that anything that's on your phone that like, one, there may be things from there that you have, and then you can put it together. And I want to touch on this, in a second, is that but I want to finish my thought here is that that you can give, to your attorney.
Yeah,
But if there's things that you have on there, is that is not considered evidence that you have to provide to the other side. So when you're in court, you can have that and you can refer to it, and the opposing side cannot come across and say that like you can't enter this in as evidence because that should have already been done. We were not given copies, and you're like, oh no, this is what I'm just referring to, so that I can go over exactly and I don't misrepresent what exactly happened. So that's a special little thing that some people may not be aware of, but they are on whether you have an iPhone or you have a Android, both of them. You just go into Google Play or the app, uh,
Apple
what is
Store,
that called? Apple Store.
Apple Store.
Yeah, and put it in, and you can download it. So and
Do you
all of
know
them
the
are.
names of any of them off the top of your head?
I don't, but what I can do is that I can send you a couple names of them, and I can send it to you, and you can put it into your
That'd be
information.
great.
So
Yeah, I can just I'll just add them to the video description.
yeah,
That would be great.
yeah.
Technology, it's really amazing, and I think that insofar as protections for survivors, right? I mean, we've got ring cameras now that can
Mhm.
sync directly to your phone. If you have, uh, either an app or, well, I guess it would be some sort of app on your phone that's voice activated that you could, or just push a button by and to record conversations as they're happening. There's so many more opportunities for survivors to protect themselves in regards to documentation now than there ever was.
Yeah, and realizing too that if there's an event that happens that is something that you are looking to call the police about, so even if it's at a public place or store or whatever, or even if it's in the neighborhood, and let's say maybe you don't have ring, or you do and they've turned it off or something, is that neighbors and stuff have rings. You may have rings, and so you can go to them, ask if you can get a copy of the video for this time duration, or at a store, ask them tell them that you're going to report blah blah blah, and ask them if you can get a copy for that time frame. So there is different avenues that are open now that is so much more supportive for victims to be able to substantiate what it is that has happened and be able to prove it. And it no longer becomes a he said, she said.
Yeah,
Because it
exactly.
completely takes out of the equation. And I can tell you that out of like how many officers that I've ever spoken to and stuff, is that like that is like golden for them, because it becomes difficult for them to have to try to say. And that's where I think that so much over history has been a huge frustration for officers with the showing up to domestic calls, is that they have to interpret themselves. And I can tell you, as somebody who's been through it myself, is that I don't want to leave it up for somebody else to interpret it for me. Thank you very much. I just lived through it. I don't need you making a decision on your version, because that's not the version that more than likely is correct. So
yeah, and it part of it comes down to, and I don't want to stray too much off this topic, but just that as over time we've seen society attitudes change towards domestic violence in general, right? I mean, much more accepting of the idea that domestic violence happens. It's not what happens in the home stays in the home type of thing. A guy doesn't have a right, or a woman. I guess there are domestic violence where the woman is the instigator. And that becomes even more difficult from a credibility standpoint, right? From a said, she said, living in this patriarchal society that we do, the tendency is to believe that the guy is the aggressor, right? And so I would say especially important for men who are in a domestic violence situation to be able to document, have video or have audio descriptions of instances that happen, so that they are believed, right? And this is one of the things that we were talking about earlier, was about beliefs, and about how important it is to believe somebody when they say, this is what I'm going through. And fortunately, there is a lot of education that's being done of law enforcement and of judiciary, so that they understand trauma more, so they understand domestic violence. But it's not ubiquitous, right? I mean, it's not everywhere yet, and
Well, but
it's
the
not.
laws haven't caught up. And so, that's the big issue. And, I think that people are much more aware of the word domestic violence being much more a familiar vocabulary, term for people to understand that they can make the connection when domestic violence is said. And I think social media has had a lot to do with that. And anytime you can bring attention to it, that's a positive. The biggest thing that I think that we're still struggling with, though, and unfortunately, even though social media has been a positive in so many ways, is that it has also two things. One is that people like it's kind of like a clip. It's like when it's in front of their face, they're horrified by it. When it's not in their face, they don't even think about it. And they don't address it. If they see something, hear something, people get in their own lives and stuff, and that's where their focus, is. We're a self-driven, focused society right now, because how many times have you seen people even out in public and stuff, and they're not even looking around. They're in their phone, right? As
Mhm.
they're going through and being on social media and being an influencer, they're on their phone and they're filming, in stores and everything else like that. They're consumed, with themselves, because that's how they're making their living. That's what they're trying to do for a living, So like, as much as like, it's like, I get it. Like, if that's what I was doing, like I would be the same way, but I'm educated on it. So I would be aware of my surroundings. So that's, the difference is that what we're doing is like, we still live in a society where the term re-victimization is very, very at the forefront, is that everything is the victim's fault. Like, why didn't they leave? Why didn't they, why didn't they just call the police? Why didn't they just leave? Why didn't, why? And never once does it ever come up as the first comment about the person who was the perpetrator. Never, ever, ever. It's always the victim having to legitimize what it is they're going through. And, we're seeing it full force right now. I mean, it couldn't be any more public and any more in everybody's face right now, is that, these Epstein, Jeffrey Epstein victims, they are having to beg and plead to be heard and to be legitimized as actual victims. And the fact that these people were victims, and that it's at a federal level, where it's having to go through Congress in order to get the, Freedom of Information Act to be applicable
Yeah.
to them, so that they can actually have the files and stuff, so that that people who are in powerful positions, that sends a huge, huge, uh, uh, exactly. That's bringing a huge message, is that there's like a two-street message that is developing from all of this. And one is that the fact that they will not back down, and that they have come together and meshed together. And I was listening to an interview of one of them, and she said, until this last September, none of them knew who the other ones were. They were
Yeah.
all just individual, and they have become so powerful as a unit, and their voices haven't backed down. And these people have dealt with it, have lived with this trauma for years and years and years, and have
Mhm.
been subjected to law enforcement, to legislators, to, powerful, powerful people downplaying and ignoring and saying that, it doesn't exist, it didn't happen, like so many things. And so that's called re-victimization. You are
Mhm.
re-victimizing it. And every time they're told no, they relive that trauma, and it makes it
Yeah.
10 times worse. Um, the other thing is, though, too, is that, but by the power of them coming together, is that we're in hopefully it will be a monumental difference that happens in our society, is that um, we will be heard, we will be legitimized, and we are not going to explain the situation to you. We're going to tell you, I am a victim, this happened to me, and I will be heard. You will not
Mhm.
tell me that you know that I am less value, you have less value than anybody else. And so
Right.
I think that that's such a powerful message. And the amount of just this fight that they're doing, the amount of healing that is happening each and every single one of them, that they carried for years, that they shouldn't have to carry that burden. They should be able to, they shouldn't even have to say that, like, I'm a victim, or they shouldn't have to be able to say I'm a survivor. They should be able to say I am who, whatever their name is, and that, I have worth, I have self-esteem, I have confidence, I have a purpose in the world, and not have to wear all these labels.
Yeah, I mean, the and it can be very difficult, right, for survivors to, especially survivors who have gone through the legal system to some degree, whether there's been a perpetrator and they've been a part of the trial, or whether they've been trying to get this person prosecuted. Uh, you feel like survivor is your only label, right? I mean,
Right.
that's your almost like your identity, and it's something that happened to us, but it doesn't have to be us. right?
Being a survivor is an experience that you had,
Mm-hmm.
but we are not defined. Who we develop to be, in the uh, characteristics that we define within ourselves, and the strength that we build from that, those are the things that define us. But our past of what we went through doesn't have to define us and make it so that the determination or people making uh, a an opinion on us is based off of our past. That's, nobody needs to live under that label. We all have experiences that we go through, some more extreme than others, but here's the thing is that it doesn't matter if one case it seems like worse than the other, is that they're all equal in the crisis that you felt because they were your experiences and nobody gets to take that away from you.
Mm-hmm. Um, I want to just kind of back up and take our lens out here a little bit. And I know most people here know because we've lived it to some degree, but can you just um, explain the domestic violence cycle? And I one of the reasons why I wanted you just to go through that is because we had touched on how much of what we think about in terms of domestic violence is just that fist, right?
Yeah.
And that's such a small portion of what domestic violence really is.
Yeah, and I'm glad. Thanks for bringing that up. It's a great area for us to cover. Is that the domestic violence wheel is that it's talking about the buildup, the incident, the calm, and the reoccurrence. And so, um, what happens in that cycle is that we have this. I think I was mentioning to you is that we are so blessed to have so many amazing organizations that are out there and women's shelters that are out there that are there during these crisis situations. But one of the things that I hope that we can really help and redirect the education on domestic violence is that when you're talking about domestic violence, is that any type of physical abuse that happens is only 10% of what falls under domestic violence. There's actually 8 different categories of domestic violence. And so it is the non-physical violence that is really happening in so much of that real. The incident doesn't necessarily have to be physical. It can be non-physical, but it can be explosive, in what
Right.
is happening in the non-physical area. And so it's important for people to understand is that it took many, many probably occurrences of non-physical abuse, which could be in emotional, psychological, it could be court abuse, it could be financial abuse, it could be sexual coercion. It can be, we are now in the midst of social media is an abuse that abusers are using. So
Yeah.
there's so many different avenues that can be used in order to put a person in a state. Um, I have spoken and I've been in groups with so many different survivors, and I can tell you is that how many of them have said is that I wish he would have just punched me because that would have healed. But the amount of emotional, psychological abuse that I've endured will last a lifetime. And so
Yeah.
that goes into what we call trauma triggers, is that there's actual studies and research that's been done. And on the backside of the right part of your brain is where trauma is stored. And where that area is stored is that you can, even going through therapy and doing work and stuff on it, is that it's not that trauma is ever going to go away, but it's about having tools available to yourself of how to help yourself work through that trauma so it does not take over your life anymore because you've already
Right.
lived that trauma. So you don't need to keep reliving that trauma. So what happens is that you could smell something, you could hear something, you could hear a song, somebody could say something, you could like maybe somebody looks similar or wearing something similar, like, or where you go, or like anything could be very trauma triggering, and it can come out of nowhere. It's not like,
Mm-hmm.
You start to have a feeling and go, oh, like I know that like maybe in a couple days or tomorrow or something, like I'm going to be triggered. That's not how trauma triggers work. Trauma triggers work
Right.
is that it is instantaneously, that there is something that triggers an event that you have experienced in some way, shape, or form. So, so you have, as I was mentioning, the buildup, and that's where a lot of those types of different events happen. Is that, it can be. I'll share is that I had where, you know, with my ex, is that he was like, constantly, angry, would be stomping back and forth, and it would be in one room and then come back and like, slam the door open and start screaming and stuff, and it would just be back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, like for hours on end. And I would be completely on edge because
Yeah.
it, like, I know and here's the thing with non-physical is that non-physical can become physical at any second. And
Yeah.
that's why it's so important to understand, and that we are able to do things within the law to take action on the amount of things that are going on from a non-physical point of view, and understanding the importance of making sure that people understand of what that is, of that, tension buildup, is that it's normally, non-physical things going on that I related to, is that, it's like old saying is that, Chinese water, torture, is that the drip, drip, drip at first, like, you, if you were to do it to a kid, they'd laugh, right? Drip, drip,
Mm-hmm.
oh, but the longer it goes on, there's more pressure that happens, right? And it builds up the more and more it goes on. And if it's continuous, then it becomes a problem, right? It's the same thing when you are talking about, the buildup of tension. And then you have an explosion, and that can be multiple different things that happen. It can be, where it could be non-physical. Well, maybe they're, especially what if they are an alcoholic, they have an addiction to drugs, that can come into play. What if they start like destroying stuff in the house, or they start throwing stuff away, or they take off in a car and they leave you by yourself, or what I mean? Like those are all non-physical things because they have not physically harmed you. When you're looking
Yeah.
at domestic violence and you're looking at physical, it's something that has physically happened to the body. And that's what they're looking for when they're talking about physical abuse. So, uh, uh, but it could be on the other side, where that's where we get into where, it can be, somebody's gotten beat up, or, God forbid, it winds up as a domestic homicide, because
Mm-hmm.
that is a real life, thing that happens, is something physical has happened to themselves that, has caused, trauma to them. And then you have the calm, and the calm is where the person actually, sits there and says, I'm so sorry. Like, and in the way I explain it too, is that when they're going through, this buildup into an incident happens, is that it is like a dopamine in their brain, is that it builds and builds and builds until the dopamine can no longer, and that's where the explosion in the incident happens, and it releases all those dopamines, and so they come down, from that. And when they come down from that, is that when at that time they're able to then, it's either I'm sorry, or they'll do things that they know that you've wanted to do, and they've like, insulted you about it, and then they go and do those things for you, or take you on a trip, or like there's, anything's on the table, as far
Right.
as like,
Anything that shows that they're expressing remorse, or
right,
that they're sorry for their
right.
actions, or they promise to change, or, you know, I
Right.
was
And then there's the
discussing.
buildup of the reoccurrences, where then they start to, get upset at you about the fact of then they are now like like they're over that calmness of being sorry. And now it's like, well, if you wouldn't have done this and you wouldn't have done that, and then it starts that build up again, where
Yeah.
it goes into that, build up. And so that timeline, there can be long stances between it. It can be shorter stances that tend to come through it. It can have, where I've heard many say that it seems like things were good for a long while and then it starts up again, like something's triggered it. So, that's the thing that I think that most people in law enforcement and in the court system get frustrated with, is that there's no one ingredient for domestic violence. Is that every case is very unique. It has its own situations, own set of circumstances, and own pattern that has developed in that particular relationship. So
Hmm.
it's how to, and please, by all means, I do not want to feel like I am like supporting or backing decisions that should have been made that weren't made by the court system or by law enforcement, because I do not support that whatsoever. I support the victims and survivors 100%, always. They're always the ones I support at the forefront. But it's having to understand of like what the what domestic violence is and what the court system is, and also wanting to to have to understand of what that process is, so that how to start to get some of the results you need to start to get some of the reprieve you need.
Right. Now, if someone was looking to get out, I mean, we know that there are services out there, right? But what are some of the things, or where are some of the places that you would recommend that somebody would turn to? Because we know that it's incredibly important to have a safety plan, to have a plan, an exit plan, like when you're looking to leave, right? Because that period right after somebody leaves their abuser is the most dangerous for them. So if somebody was looking to leave, what are some services that you think that they could turn to?
Well, if they're in immediate crisis emergency, if they call law enforcement normally has connections with shelters that can get them in. One of the biggest things that we come across is that being able to have shelters that actually have room to accommodate those
Yeah,
survivors going in there. But there's a lot of times that shelters will have where they have made agreements with different hotels, and they will pay the rate, for those to go stay at a hotel. That is, an avenue, for survivors. Um, I'm a big advocate of getting a order of protection that gives you for the rights for the house, and that the abuser needs to leave. I think that we could put a huge dent in the issues that are going on for so many survivors. Is that why are you making the victim and the children leave? And
yeah,
then they lose their job, they lose their home, they lose their ability to have access to anything that they need. The children are suffering in all of this. Is that we need to rethink of how we're approaching this. It's the
yeah,
approach right now is that the first thing that people say is like, where can people go? And you know, and I can tell you that has probably come from a place of frustration myself as somebody who's been through it. And it doesn't matter how much education I get about the system, like that's still a pill I can't swallow. Is
yeah,
that like, why is it falling on the victim? So my thought process is that if they get an order of protection where they get right to the house, they come to the house, like it's pretty easy to find them.
yeah,
So
yeah.
like, why are we
Well, and
making it
it's
something that it
especially
doesn't
when
need
there's
to be?
children involved, right? I mean, it keeps that stability for them as
That's
well.
right. Why are we making yeah, exactly, 100%. So, yeah, and that is something that like we probably don't have like the time to talk. That's a whole conversation itself, just that right
Yeah,
there.
because
But
unfortunately, I don't have 2 hours today because I do have
I know,
promotion. Yeah,
but
I've got promotion for a book launch that I need to get to in a few minutes. But I did want to talk about one last subject though before I let you go today, and that is touching on some of the laws or the types of laws that you have worked to change? The what are some of the pain points that you see that need to be, worked on within the legal system or within the legislatures?
Yeah, no, exactly. So some of the laws that I worked on is that there was a bill that got passed. It made harassment and stalking on social media a criminal act, and became a misdemeanor. So I would love to have been a felony, but I will take what gains I can get, which
Right.
is something that is a huge win, because we are living in a time where social media has become a playground for abusers and pedophiles. So we really need to, zone in and make them accountable. That it's just
Absolutely.
behind the screen. It's still as much as a crime as if you were in person. So,
Yep.
and then I also helped testify and two other ones. Is that one was on the bill that made it where the orders or protections, when they're granted, that is for 2 years instead of 1 year, so that it gives the survivor reprieve and being able to, work on putting their life back together versus
Hmm.
being stressed out that I only have so many months before I have to look at reliving this nightmare again. So
Yeah.
that is a win, in the survivor's box. And then also on
And
bill that was,
were these state laws in your
they
state
were,
that were
mhm.
changed?
Yes,
Okay.
it was in the state of Arizona.
Okay.
And then also a bill that is um, uh, it is making its way, but it's about having a health center that has like everything under one roof, so that when survivors go in there, like everything that they need is in there, that they can get the medical care they need, they can get the counseling, that they need, if they need any type of, medical, help for the children, that's, any help they need and stuff, that it's all under one roof. And what's so beneficial of that is that, one, it's all in one place. And secondly is that these different professionals can interact and talk with each other and stuff. And just think of how powerful that would be when a survivor has to go to court and, they have all this backed up documentation from all these cross professionals who have worked together with this person, and being able to
Right.
document the history and what actually is going on and happening. So I think that's such a pervasive area that we need to look at growing, to have that should be everywhere. That's something that really needs to be established. So I actually have a bill that I'm working on myself, where it works a little more detailed on orders of protection, where it actually develops templates where it makes it where it's very easy for the victim to go in and make sure that they're just checking off the correct boxes, and that it
Hmm.
has the correct verbiage, and then they just enter that their acts of crisis, the events that have happened, so that it's done correctly. Because if it's not done correctly, one, it can't get granted, and two, if they do like a period or a comma, incorrectly, it can make the difference in whether law enforcement can do something. So it's really important to have that. And then also, the bill would include is that that it would be served via email and text immediately, versus having to go through this whole thing, is where a victim feels like they're protected because they have order of protection in their hands. But no, it's only effective when it's actually served to the person. So, if you
Hmm.
think about it, all court dates, even for when they want to fight the order of protection, it's all done through electronics from the court system. And they're like, if you say, well, I didn't get the email, and the court says, not my problem. So,
Yeah.
and then if they get right to the house, that, it comes across the text that, and there'll be a phone number where you can schedule an appointment to be able to go to the home and be able to get your things. So it'll come across saying you are not, do not go home. So,
Hmm.
and what makes it easier is that if they do go to the home, then immediately the police can be called and the police can get them, right? So why are we going through like all this concoction of like having to figure out where they are, all this game playing, and at a certain point, if the police can't get them, then they will return the order of protection to the courthouse. So they
Right.
won't need to
Yeah.
try
Yeah.
for so long. So what's the benefits of everything that the survivor, this victim, went thinking they were getting reprieve, and they're not actually getting any reprieve whatsoever?
I just want, I have to find I keep saying I'm going to change the color of my cursor because it's white and it gets totally lost on my white background. Um, Misha says, in Oklahoma has been working on reducing the number of times domestic violence victims must testify, helping them to avoid reliving traumatic experiences. Also dropping the statute of limitations. And that's something that I'm not familiar with in regards to domestic violence, but I do know across the country, states have been working on either dropping uh, the usually it's only for child sexual assault, dropping the statute of limitations there, or having it be X number after you turn the age of majority, or X number of years after you finally disclose to somebody and actually come forward. So different states are handling it different.
Yeah.
We have, I think,
The general rule is that, especially for sexual assault, is that normally after 5 years you can't report it, which is very unfortunate because most victims are turn inward, are so suppressive of after this incident's happened, are so afraid to say anything and so embarrassed. There's a lot of different emotions that go with it. And it takes a lot of time and therapy and stuff before they get to the point where they may decide that I actually have what it takes, that I do want to, to press charges. So,
Yeah,
and we've
absolutely,
taken that
absolutely.
ability, by having the bill set up that way, we are now like punishing the victim again.
Yeah, for adult victims, particularly, it's
Mhm.
things need to change. I mean, I'm pleased with the work that has been done for child victims, and a lot of the change in the laws for child sexual assault that happened when somebody was a child um, has been because of the issues that were brought to light with the different organizations, Mormon Church or the Catholic Church, the Boy Scout of Americas. You've seen, I'd say at this point we've got about 3/4 of the states have looked at their statutes, and they've either changed them, or some states have opened up look back periods and they've said, okay, for the next 2 years, there's no statute of limitations, right?
Yeah.
You can bring it. But after that, we're reverting back to what we have. But it hasn't been changing for on the adult side, which is disappointing. And personally, um, feel that needs to go. Crystal, who is here tonight, she lives in Canada. Canada does not have a statute of limitations on sexual
That's
assault at
fantastic. Yeah.
all,
Well, and here's
which
the
is
thing is that with
fabulous, but their
children who,
sentencing sucks.
yeah,
So it's like,
children who have experienced sexual abuse, they are the most underreported, the most underbelieved, and the most under charged and
yes,
follow through to trial. So there's lots of conversations about it, but there's still not a whole lot of moving the needle and making a difference on the judicial side.
yeah, there's, yes, definitely still a lot of work to be done. And obviously with domestic violence, again, it's going to be state by state in terms of statute of limitations, but also in terms of sentencing, right? I mean,
Mhm.
domestic violence used to be brought as just assault, whether it was
Well, here's the thing: is
a
domestic
simple
violence is
assault or an
normally.
aggravated assault. But now some states do have a separate domestic violence charge,
Well, yeah,
which,
but domestic violence normally, the tough thing is normally it's charged as a misdemeanor. So what happens is that you normally have to get 6 domestic violence misdemeanors in order to be equivalent to be charged as 1 felony.
Michigan, it's 3, unless there is an aggravating factor, and then it's
Right,
automatically bumped up to
right,
a felony.
right,
And
and I
I,
think
I
that's
can only
pretty,
speak specifically to Michigan because that's where I live.
yeah,
But yeah, again, different states handle it differently. And although it's gotten better, still a lot of work to be done in the area, right? In terms of how it's charged and the sentencing that people actually receive. I mean, the misdemeanors, it's 90 days, 93 days,
yeah.
right? And
Well, and
and if they get
when
that,
somebody's arrested on the spot, they normally are only held in jail for 24 hours.
yeah, yeah, they're out
It
right
doesn't
away.
it, it doesn't give a whole lot of time for anything to be done.
Yeah, because most are released on their own recognizant, right? They don't
Mhm.
even have to post bail money.
Yep.
So it can be very, very, very difficult. Um, so hang on one second. Misha, I'm not simulcasting. Crystal M is here, who is in Canada. Crystal Phoenix, we got a bunch of crystals.
Ah,
I'm not sure where Crystal Phoenix is. She might be working. She sometimes works in the evening, if that's who you're speaking of. I'm she is going live tomorrow, I think her post said, Misha. Tomorrow at 11, I think it was. Um, so yeah. Um, and Misha says, difficult statement, but necessary. The man who killed Christina, who is her
mhm.
daughter, her Misha's daughter was a victim of domestic homicide. And Rachel
Yeah. Well,
supposedly has a laundry list of
orders
protective
and
orders
protections
and abuse on his
when they're
spouse.
order protections, actually, like, every officer will tell you is that order protections are there to be a piece of paper to substantiate that if they are caught, they can be taken. It does not protect you from
Yeah,
potential violence. And
it's
it
not a
is
preventative
actually, it's not
measure.
a preventative measure, and it's normally the most dangerous time for a victim.
Yeah, yeah. So I know that people feel differently, about them as to whether or not they should or shouldn't file for the protective orders.
I always say I would always, as somebody who's been through it and somebody who understands the law, is that I would always suggest getting an order of protection because you are documenting, it's a pattern of history.
Exactly, exactly. And if you're somebody who's been going through it and you haven't been documenting, it really does force you to think about everything that happened, right? And maybe start that documentation process. So, yeah, a lot that we could talk about. Definitely as time goes on, I want to stay in contact with you. You've got
Yeah.
my email now, and as things come up or as you start working on things, want to come back on, we'd love
Yeah,
to have you in
absolutely.
different
I'd like to mention
areas.
real quickly too is that as we're speaking about all this stuff today, is that I have coming out at the beginning of next year is a book of how not to lose your voice through the divorce, and it has templates and resources and checklists and all that kind of stuff. So
Awesome. Well, yeah, you send me when you're ready to blast that out on all your social media, send it to me and I will definitely do the same for here. So, um I do have Kimberly's LinkedIn listed in her bio that you can find in the video description here. And if you want to remind people again what the name of your organizations are.
yeah, EY Divorce and Trauma Consulting.
Mhm. And then Envision You is the nonprofit. Am I
That's
correct?
correct. Hmm.
All right, wonderful. Well, we are out of time for today because I have to get over and do some book promotion for my book that just came out. So, anybody,
Congratulations.
thank you. Yes, it was part of an anthology. put out by Women Changing the World. And if anybody wants to go over to their Facebook page, they have been live since 7. They're doing every day, they're doing different authors from the book who are presenting different things about their chapter. So people can go over to Facebook and catch that. I do want to mention, I do have somebody scheduled in a couple of weeks who I think, Kimberly, you might benefit from connecting with. And I think I don't have her social media stuff yet, but it will be coming in the video description. Her name is Kristen Pines. She's actually in Virginia, but she is a trauma educator. She worked for the YWCA for 20 years and then just started her own company this year. And so you guys have a lot of connections, and she did a lot of work doing integrative work. She created a family justice center where they had all these services kind of under one roof. And so I don't know if ideas might cross between the two of you, if that'll be any help, but I just wanted to throw that out and mention it.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic.
So she will be on 2 weeks from tonight, December 3rd at 6 p.m. Our next live is going to be Saturday at 3 p.m. I don't have a topic yet, guys, because I've been focused on this and work this week, and it's been a little nuts, but I will definitely have something up here soon for you. And Kimberly, if you want to send me any names of apps, for documentation for the domestic violence, I will definitely post those. I think that is such a fabulous idea for people to be able to have it on their phone and to have a separate lock for it. So if your partner is going through your phone, they're not able to access it all, right?
Well, they're not going to even know what it is. If it looks like a calculator, they're going to think it's a calculator.
Exactly. I think that's brilliant. So I'm excited just to look, even though I'm not in that situation anymore. I would love to just, kind of poke around with it and just, see what it is. So thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Anytime. Thank you to everyone who is here in the chat. If you're watching on replay, if you haven't subscribed, please do so and hit that like button and the bell all for notifications, and you'll make sure to get notified when we're live. And if you haven't already, if you can hit the like button or the unlike button, the algorithm honestly doesn't care which one you do. I do care though. So if you do like it, hit the thumbs up. That just helps push things out. And if you have any comments, make sure and leave them after the show. I appreciate it. So thank you to all. Kimberly, I'm going to drop you down if you want to hang on for just a few seconds. I'll be with you right after the ending music is over.
Sounds
Whoop. I always do that too quickly, and then people are like, whoop, gone. So please remember, guys, you are worthy, you are valuable, and you are loved just the way you are for who you are. So giant hugs and love from me. Mwah. Thank you so much for being here today. It was really interesting to talk to Kimberly about all the different things that she's involved in. And, law, you guys know, is my day job, and that's what I am passionate about as well, in addition to trauma work. So it was really interesting to hear things from her side of the story. And we haven't covered domestic violence a whole lot, but we're going to be doing more so in the next few weeks. I've got some other people this is kind of a specialty of theirs, but they come at it from different angles. So I'm really trying to bring a well-rounded picture of what's going on and where the education and advocacy kind of needs to be in the future. So with that, enjoy the outro. Surviving together, never alone. Bye, guys.
Through the fire, through the rain, we have walked through endless pain, but we stand, we rise again, strong break the chain. Surviving together, hearts open wide, lifting each other through every tide. The past may have shaped us, but it won't define. Together we heal, together we shine. Every tear, every scar tells the story of who we are. Not just survivors, but warriors too. With love as our armor, we see this through. We see you, we hear you, and we believe in you. Surviving together, hearts open wide, lifting each other through every tide. The past may have shaped us, but it won't define. Together we heal, together we shine. We see you, we hear